This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our series, our movie review series, where we're going through the Dune movie scene by scene, talking about all the details that you may have missed or that you may have questions about, and giving our insights after watching the movie multiple times. Looking forward to go through this all with you. So last episode we gave our overall reactions to the movie, and now we're actually going to start with the first part of the movie, looking at Caladan and take it from there. So this is Marcus Gabriel, your editor at DuneInfo.com, here today with Garen.
Hey, it's Garen again. Good to see everyone. I can be found on Twitter at Dune Companion.
And welcome back, Simon.
Hey guys, I can officially talk about the movie now. Really excited.
And we have a special guest joining us again today from the UK, Mark from DuneInfo.
Hi, how are you doing? Glad to be back. Thanks for inviting me.
So Mark, how many times have you seen the movie?
4 times so far, and counting.
Cool. So we're going to go into all those impressions and reactions.
Dune movie news.
So we have one big story for today, and that's of course that Dune has premiered in North America, South America, China, the UK. So pretty much most in the world can see it right now. I know that there are some countries where it's not yet possible, unfortunately, but the Dune has premiered widely now. And in its first weekend at the US box office, Dune has hit 40.1 million domestically. So that exceeded those early industry projections. And to put this in perspective, this is the best opening, 3-day opening for a Warner Brothers movie since 2019. So since before the pandemic. So however you want to put the narrative, I mean, this is a big win. And on top of that, Dune has crossed the 200 million mark globally. So there's another 20 million that came in from China. I haven't checked the UK numbers yet today. I know that it was 3.3 million from Friday. So we'll have to see what final totals are going to be from the weekend. But yeah, looking promising all around. And that's just those 3 regions, and then of course we have all of South America, some additional countries in Europe that is open. So this is looking good. Mark, any initial reactions to where we are at this stage?
It's just looking really good. 200 million, so on a budget of 165 million, reportedly. I know there's marketing costs and stuff like that, and all of that won't be going back to Legendary and Warner Brothers. But even so, that looks a very good, healthy amount of money, all things considered, with HBO Max and the pandemic.
They have spent a lot on marketing on this movie. They haven't, they haven't skimped on that. So the total expenses for including the marketing is going to come out quite high. I mean, realistically, I think it will be challenging for the movie to break even, at least in the immediate short term. But I mean, that's not the expectation this year. Like they're looking at how well the movie does in the box office, HBO Max, merchandising, all those other factors, and going back to the point, Denis Villeneuve had said it would have to be a disaster at the box office for part 2 not to happen. This doesn't look like a disaster to me. So let's not spend too much time on the news, because we had a lot to dig into. Full spoilers here. So if you haven't seen the movie, go back a couple of episodes to our spoiler-free impressions, or we have one episode where we recently talked about the Dune board game. Both great episodes. But for now, be warned, we're not going to hold back on any spoilers.
I must not fear, for fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear.
Mark, I'll start with you. First of all, overall reactions, because you haven't been on the show for a while and you've watched the movie multiple times. I want to hear your overall thoughts. What do you think of this movie? What did you like most?
Yes, it's spectacular. So I first saw it beginning of October, and that was in a 700-seat cinema down in London for the one of the press previews. And that was great. It was. I think we did an article on Dune Newsnet. It was packed. Everyone was very attentive. There was no phone glare or people shuffling in the seats. Everyone was enraptured for 2.5 hours. Round of applause at the end. It was absolutely great. I saw it again yesterday at the IMAX in Bradford. Again, that was a full house, pretty much, I think. Huge screen. Everyone seems to be loving it. I love it. Can't wait to see it again and and get it on 4K Blu-ray when it comes out next year, I think. So, but yeah, I want to see it as many times as I can in the theatre and in many different formats, because it's probably going to be another couple of years before we get a chance to see it again, because I'm hoping they'll show it again before part 2.
Yeah, so Simon, you weren't on the last episode, but you have watched the movie also multiple times.
I have, and honestly, I was blown away. My theater was packed for a Thursday night in Lacey, Washington, which is kind of a small town, but I don't think there was many seats left. It was also kind of interesting having my mask on. I felt like a Fremen as I was watching it, especially when we get to Arrakis. But overall, amazing. There's a couple of performances that I can't stop thinking about. Oscar Isaac is just amazing. There's a scene where we'll get to that eventually in our review part with the Baron that is just chilling and haunting. The actor, and I'm totally forgetting his name, who plays Piter, is probably the standout actor for me right now. It's funny because he was my favorite part of Suicide Squad, and love everyone in the cast of Dune, but he was just so creepy and eerie. I loved it. I have a couple of nitpicks, and we'll get to them. As a pug owner, I'm very disappointed. There was not even one pug. Yeah. But overall, a good solid 9.5. I've seen it only once in the theater. I've seen it on HBO Max quite a bit, and it's been in the background of the house.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I would have liked to see more of David Dastmalchian. And like he's been so enthusiastic about this film, promoting it in all the different interviews. So Garen, and I know that you've now seen the movie, I think 2 times in cinemas. Last time we spoiled it for you before you got to see it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, you guys didn't spoil the experience for me at all. I just thought it was just a perfect balance of someone who loves the book, loves this world that Frank Herbert created, and is really a fan of Denis. And I just thought he hit on all cylinders. I just came out of there. In fact, the experience of being in both of the IMAX theaters, I went to 2 different IMAX theaters. And by the way, IMAX theaters are not all created equally. Well, I'll talk about that another time. And immediately as the film ends, people just start talking, and they start grouping in clumps all throughout the lobby, out into the parking lot. People are still talking about the movie. And that was my experience internally. I just kept experiencing this in my mind all throughout the day. I had to go see it the next day just because I wanted to be back in that world again. And at first, my mind did pick apart some of the things that were so important to me in the book. But overall, I thought Denis just absolutely nailed creating a visual sensory experience that Frank Herbert would be absolutely proud of. So I couldn't be more happy.
Also, Garen, the whole entire time when I was watching it with all the ornithopters, I was like, oh, I know someone that's going to be happy when he sees this movie. Yeah.
They couldn't have been better. There was so many more shots than what I'd seen in all the promos and stuff. And man, just a great, not only a great design, but also it plays such an important part in the story, the different ornithopters, and just thought it was awesome.
And Garen, you sort of alluded to that, of course, because this is a 2.5 hour adaptation of like approximately half of the book. And of course, there are scenes in the book that didn't make it into the movie. Was that disappointing to you at all?
Honestly, Marcus, it was at first, because I was so attached to some of those elements. But it was similar to my Lord of the Rings experience. And I don't want to compare those too much. I want to compare the good elements of Lord of the Rings to Dune. But it's like I understood after thinking about it why Denis made those choices. And because you can't take, we all know this, you can't take a book and just mirror it right onto a film. You can't really do that. So I thought the decision making was perfect to make an adaptation. So was I initially a little disappointed a couple of times, but the way he transformed those experiences to kind of capture the essence or the spirit of some of those scenes from the book, just absolutely nailed it. I don't know how anyone could have even done a better job, actually.
Yeah, and I know, Mark, I enjoyed like your coverage of, as you mentioned, of the press screening, and you had given your initial review to the movie, and you had mentioned the same thing, that there are, of course, like scenes that didn't make it into the book, and I liked how you described it, that, you know, like for longtime fans of the movie, you know, they can still have it in their mind that these are happening off screen. So, like, did you have any additional thoughts on that now that you've watched the movie 4 times? Do you feel that it was the right decision not to include those scenes, or like, is there anything that you would have really preferred that stayed in?
I don't think I disagree with any of the creative choices. You know, they've edited it to his vision, and we know that there are scenes that have been shot that have been deleted. And I'm hoping we see those on deleted scenes one day. I know Denis Villeneuve said that, you know, that cut is his cut. There won't be a director's cut that's longer, but I'm hoping we do at least get those deleted scenes. But yeah, I think it's perfect as it is.
And that was some of my nitpicks when I said I have several nitpicks, but I get it. You can't have, especially this is only the first half, or else it'll be a 15-hour book, you know, a 15-hour movie of a book. But there are some crucial scenes that I love so much in the book that sadly are not there, but it works. And I understand for editing purposes, for also, I remember when I was going to film school, the first rule was always make a short movie so you can turn it around as many times in a day, so like that people can see it in the theater. And, you know, for a 2.5-hour movie, I think no one ever looked at their watch or their phone and being like, oh God, we're only 20 minutes into this. When is this going to pick up? You know, I'm happy that those scenes were shot. Like I agree with Mark. I agree with you, Marcus. I feel like those scenes do exist somewhere in our head canon. We know there is more of Dr. Yui. We know there is more of Jessica and Paul. I mean, the nerd that I am, I came home and I watched all the trailers. I was like, there's dialogue in there that I don't remember watching. Turn on HBO Max. You know, like one of the biggest scenes that we keep seeing is the promo shot of Jessica saying, "It's time." I can't find that anywhere in the film. So overall, I understand why it's there. I would love when it comes out on Blu-ray or, you know, iTunes or whatever, that we have that option of seeing those deleted scenes. And without going into full spoiler about Caladan, how cool would it have been to see Gurney just rock out and play a song for Paul, you know? And there's a picture of it in the Art and Soul of Dune. So I'm like, oh, you know, it's out there somewhere.
But yeah, I'd love to actually see and hear Gurney play those. I think Hans Zimmer said that he actually wrote a song for it. So yeah, come on, include that somewhere, please.
One other overview, Marcus, I just want to mention is the decision to not include actual images of the Emperor or Fade or, you know, a couple of other characters. At first, before going into the film, I was a little concerned about that, because when you read the book, those are pretty important, like third stage guild navigator and people like that are so critical in the story. And yet I think that was a really great choice, because for so many people, if you don't have a book that you're going through at a very slow pace and you're absorbing all this information, an audience would have been absolutely overwhelmed by the number of characters. Like even the fact that, I think, if you guys correct me, I think they only say Thufir Hawat's name one time. I think Paul just says it to him. Maybe they say his last name a couple of times, but it's like, I wonder, did people catch Thufir's name? Like, because he's a key character, but I think Denis was really careful about not overwhelming the first time viewer or the newbie with so many names and so many characters that they don't know what's going on. So I think putting this story into the hands of a master craftsman like Denis, I think really paid off, because the story is, it is overwhelming, but it's not overwhelming in a way that makes your brain shut down. It's overwhelming like, wow, what an incredible universe. I want to explore more of this. So I really, like you said, Mark, I think the creative decision-making was right on.
You know, going to the Emperor thing, I love that we keep hearing about him. We keep hearing about, sorry to use a Star Wars reference, a Phantom Menace, you know, but I love, it's very much also one thing. If you take a movie like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which I hate Westerns, but that's one of my favorite, like top 20 movies of all time. We keep hearing about Bolivia this whole entire time. So in a way, it's a character. And finally, at the end, they go, spoiler, they go to Bolivia. But you're building that tension. So when Bolivia shows up, finally, you're like, oh, crap, I get it. And, you know, part of my fanboy attitude was like, okay, they're going to save Faye Rafa right about now. Maybe now. Okay, they didn't. But also, I'm curious to know who they're going to cast as Faye. I know we've talked about this in the past. But who is the Emperor going to be played by? You know, we're going to have years of, in our headcanon, being like, well, maybe this actor, maybe this actor. Also, we have mention of Erlon, but it's so subtle. And you're right, it's not sensory overload for newbies.
And Mark, you touched on the Art of Soul. I understand that you've received a limited edition copy.
Yeah, that came. It's a weighty tome, but it arrived last week. So it's Bene Gesserit symbol on the back and the Art of Soul of Dune in a Bene Gesserit script on the front. And then that comes. It's a pretty hefty. Let me take the book out. So you get the Art and Soul book with Harkonnen and Atreides symbol on the front. Inside, it's identical to the standard edition. And then you also get a book of photography by the director of photography, Greg Fraser, and poems and writing by Josh Brolin in there as well, which is very nice. It comes with a autograph card of several people. I'm not going to list them all. And also a nice little booklet, which is a replica of the Fremkit instruction manual that we see in the movie briefly, telling you how to inflate the still tent, how the thumper works and stuff like that. I am trying to translate that, but I don't know if you've seen the guy who did all the languages, David Peterson. He's put a PDF of all the characters, and there are hundreds of characters. So looking up every single letter and symbol takes a while. So I might have to give up on that one. But yeah, it's a lovely edition, very expensive. And the first set has sold out, but there's another set of 500 without Timothy's autograph. But yeah, a lovely edition. So
let's go and start looking at the beginning of the movie. So I guess let's start all the way at the beginning. Like even before the logo comes on the screen, we hear that guttural alien sounding voice. Dreams are messages from the deep. Mark, now that you've seen the movie four times, what does that mean to you?
Well, the interesting thing for me is that the voice sounds like it's the Sardaukar language, which is an unusual choice for that. Maybe it's not the Sardaukar, maybe it's a navigator or something. But yeah, I think it's very much one of the themes of the movie is, Paul's prescient visions and the ancestral memories, which is the Bene Gesserit voices are introduced quite heavily in the film. That's not something that was in the Lynch version at all, but it's in the voice. You get an overlay of other voices, and Paul's visions, you hear those female voices, those Bene Gesserit ancestral voices coming through. So it's an unusual choice. I can't think of any other film that has a message even before the studio logos. But yeah, in several screenings, there's been kind of you can feel a reaction rippling through the audience. It's like, what was that? Nobody was expecting. A lot of people weren't expecting that. So it's something that grabs you from the start.
I do agree with Mark. It does sound more Sardaukar. After I was watching the movie, I was like, wait, that sounded like that voice in the beginning.
You guys, what I think about that opening line is it's a little indication that this is going to be a completely different experience than what you're used to. This is not a Marvel movie. This is not Star Wars. This is not Lord of the Rings. This is something completely different. And it's almost like this mental subconscious cue, because the average moviegoer doesn't have any idea what that means, right? As a fan of the book, I have a sense of what that means. I have a pretty good idea what that means. But I just thought that was actually kind of a subtle little brilliant, milestone to say, get ready. This is going to be nothing like what you're used to. So prepare,
Yeah.
And I agree with you guys. I on the second time watching it, I recognized that guttural language when all the Sardaukar forces were out in their formation, and that guy was doing the hand signs on top of that tower, and that's what it was. It sounded exactly the same to me. So why it's the Sardaukar, I don't know. That's really interesting. I'm sure we'll learn.
So, and then once the movie opens, we go immediately into the opening narration from Chani. So we've discussed that when we watched the IMAX screening. So it's basically like Chani is explaining the situation in her world. You see things right from the beginning from the Fremen perspective. So even though the character of Chani and Zanaya is not in this movie very much, I mean, it's really key that she's the one narrating this opening of the movie and setting the context of her peoples have been oppressed. The Harkonnens are now leaving. The Fremen don't know the reason. They just know that someone else is going to come. Are they going to be better? Are they going to be even worse than the Harkonnens? They don't know what their fate is going to be. Garrett, in terms of like the introduction to a movie, because in other cases you've had like actual someone talking to the screen narration, like how do you feel that this has worked now that you've seen the movie?
I thought it was brilliant. I actually thought, I'd love to know how many drafts they did to get that opening right and to make the creative decisions to have it be focused on the Fremen point of view. But I think it's really important that my attention is focused on the native people of Arrakis. And now I see the Atreides house coming to take stewardship. And I think that again is Denis helping the uninitiated moviegoer to be like, oh, okay, there's these people, and then there's these people, and I need to care about these people. I need to care about the Fremen because this is their home world. I also need to care about the Atreides because they're in the middle of this, political challenge. So I actually thought it was a brilliant opening, and it just immediately grounds you on, because we're going to start in Caladan, but it actually grounds you on Arrakis. So this is the place we're going to, and this is the place. The movie's name is Dune, right, which is Arrakis. So I just think they were so careful about making sure that as a moviegoer, I'm identifying with the key elements that will help me to go through the rest of this experience on screen.
And then immediately they have that transition, because you have the Chani like as in a dream, and you have Paul waking up, and that shows the importance of this connection that you're going to see throughout the movie, because this is going to be a recurring thing all throughout the movie where Paul is forming this connection. So like later on when he meets her, like he knows who she is. So going into that transition, basically you have on Caladan, and you immediately come to the breakfast scene where Lady Jessica and Paul are sitting at the table. So starting with you, Mark, I know that there's so much details in that scene. Like, what stands out for you once you've watched it multiple times?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to our reactions after the IMAX preview. It's just the pacing of it and the opportunity for the movie to breathe. We have a pause where Paul tries to center himself before trying the voice a second time. And we get the shots of the wind charms and the painting and the marquette of the bullfighting. It's just a lovely pace and something. I enjoy that scene. It's a slow scene. It's a wonderful scene with mother and son. It's beautiful. And just going back to Garen's point about how many iterations they did for trying to start the movie. Apparently, the very first draft tried to start it with the Gom Jabbar scene, which is how the book starts. But Denny has said that you were just throwing people in at the deep end. Another version of the script has a prologue, but sort of an animated prologue by the Reverend Mother, talking about the guild and the different planets and the spice. So I don't know how many versions they went to, but yeah, I agree. Centering it and grounding it on Arrakis at the very start, brilliant idea.
I love that breakfast scene so much. Like, we had seen it when we saw the IMAX preview. And when it happened, when we saw it again, I was like, oh, I missed this. I missed this little beautiful little scene right here. What's also interesting is I agree with everyone. The opening's great because they introduce you to the world of Dune. You know who everyone is. And right away, you have that quiet little intimate scene between our two main characters when you really think about part one. We're introduced to Jessica, we're introduced to Paul and their relationship. It's very much like what Rebecca Ferguson has been saying all along. She's his mother, but also his teacher. And I think it's so crucial that you get introduced to those two characters, have a quiet moment to know who they are and what's, their relationship. I think it's brilliant. I love and all the stuff with the bull. I think it's so crucial. While I was watching this movie, I was like, one of the words I would describe it is legacy. And that's something that Oscar Isaac, Duke Leto, makes very clear to Paul. Like, this is, Arrakis will be my legacy to you. And also, is it just me, or does that painting kind of look like Patrick Stewart? I know I have probably said that when we did the IMAX show, but yeah. And I really would love one of those little maquettes.
But yeah, like you see all this history. So for someone who's familiar with the Dune universe and all the lore around it, there's like every single detail that it means something. The bullfights were an important aspect of the culture on Caladan. Like House Atreides himself fought the bulls in the arena. That was like important point, because right out the bat, like you're getting the introduction to the two main characters, because Lady Jessica and Paul, like, we're going to see the whole movie throughout their perspective. So there's going to be a lot of other characters, but some of them are like in the movie for a short bit, but these are the characters who we follow throughout the whole point, and they have a different journey going through. Then we get the transition, that Paul has to get ready for the ceremony. So they're going to have to like accept, and Paul makes a comment like, if we already know we have to go, like, what's the point? Yeah, it's ceremony. And one part of the exposition that I really liked, because in the next film you have like Paul actually sitting like with a projector device, and he's basically learning. He's doing the research and learning about Arrakis. He knows he's going there, and I felt that was like so natural. It's better than having someone like on the screen like telling you the story, but you see like Paul himself discovering. Like, Garen, did anything stand out to you about like that scene with Paul alone, like learning about his destination?
Yeah, I really love that. So those are film books. I remember reading the novel back in the 80s and wondering, like, even in the 80s, a film book sounded like that was old technology, but I thought it was a brilliant design. I actually did think of Lynch's Dune a little bit in that moment. but I thought it was handled much better in this version, because it actually felt like it was some technology, being able to project a 3D image, and it's instructing you, and you're learning from this narrator voice that sounds like something from an encyclopedia. But it also is introducing the audience to a lot of important facts and preparing them again to know more about this planet and what it's going to be like, because that's where they're going. So no, I really enjoyed that part of it. Another thing I wanted to mention in the earlier Jessica and Paul scene is, if someone would have told me that Denis was going to play a little bit more with the dialogue, I actually love what he did, where you hear Paul say things like what a teenager would say today. Like when Jessica says, make me give you the water. And he's like, Mom, I just woke up. That line, Mom, I just woke up, is brilliant, because I'm centered on, this is a son and a mother, and this is real. This feels natural. It doesn't feel weird and mechanical. And so anyway, that happens a few times throughout the film, where Paul's dialogue feels really realistic for a teenager, and I like that. It made it more real for me. But to answer your question about the film book scene, I loved it, and it wasn't very long, but you actually learn quite a bit in those short few seconds.
I had mentioned this in a past episode, but you immediately see the contrast, because you've had the introduction from Chani earlier on, and you get to see the Fremen perspective, but now you see like Paul watching this official video, and it's talking about how the Fremen are dangerous, and like putting them as the bad guys, maybe like almost like terrorists in a way. So you see like how the different sources of information, how they conflict with each other. And about the part about technology, because of course Dune is a universe where there aren't computers, so there's no artificial intelligence or anything like that, because that's how that society has evolved and focused more on the development of the human mind. But there is advanced technology, like we see those this film book for one. You see also the glow globes that are floating through the hallways as they're walking by. So and of course the highliners. So there is very advanced technology. It's just that it's when it comes to the thinking aspect, then that's left entirely up to the humans.
Very much two point of views, and it already shows you kind of like the politics of, there's the lower class, which in this movie you can say is the Fremens, and then you got the bourgeoisie Atreides. It's very much like, are you gonna watch Fox or are you gonna watch CNN? Here in the States. So I love that scene, and once again, like you guys were saying, it's telling us, for like especially for newbies, here's what you got to know. So for someone that doesn't know anything, you're probably gonna think, oh crap, Fremens are bad. They're the Atreides are my heroes. I'm going to go through this whole entire journey being like, yay, Team Atreides. So it's very important introducing this world, and it's very much like Paul. So Paul doesn't know that much about the Fremen. He knows a little bit about them, but if he's told early on that they're dangerous, as the audience, we're going on that journey with Paul. And I'm looking at it on HBO Max on my second monitor, and I love just the set design. They're moving. They're getting ready for the move. It's not like, hey, we're moving soon, and there's still a bunch of stuff. Like the movers are there.
Yeah, and then we have the scene that the Imperium envoy arrives on Caladan, so to have the formal announcement of House Atreides going to Arrakis. I think the key thing for this scene is this was one of the ones that wasn't in the book, so just like the breakfast scene as well actually. But here again, you really get to see House Atreides. Like it really introduces like this is the honorable House Atreides. You get to see their leadership. You get to see like the pride that they have in them, and the dynamics of power already in the universe. So what stood out to you most in this scene, Simon?
So I feel like we've talked about the scene quite a bit because of the IMAX. It's the scale. It's the costume design, the coloring. It's just beautiful. And it is very much, this is House Atreides. Technically, House Atreides is a military family, and it shows that military background. You know, we know that whole entire scene with Gurney smile, I am, but it just shows very much they're here, they're ready for this. Duke Leto might not be ready for this journey, and you can tell that he's not sure of himself. You know, he probably knows that something's going to happen to him. I feel the whole entire movie, I feel when Oscar Isaac is on screen, he has fear. You know, and I know fear is a big part of this whole entire story, but fear is the mind killer for him, because I think even at this point, he knows he's Dune. You know, full spoiler again, he doesn't make it out alive early on in the movie. So I think at this point, he knows that he's doing this for Paul. We see that relationship between Paul and Leto. Like, he cares about his son. Everything that he's doing is doing it for his son, leaving this legacy, using that word again, for Paul.
Yeah, and there's so much to pick up on, and including like who all is in that envoy. Mark, what did you think about the portrayal of the members of the guild?
Yeah, they're not on screen very long. It's not entirely clear who they are or what they are, but it seems like they've got orange spice gas in the helmets, and people are free-framed on the HBO Max, and it seems to be there's a slight blueness to the eyes, but you know, it's very hard to tell because of the mask and the gas in there. But for me, I know we've discussed this before. I like the beginning and the end of this scene as well, because we've got a lovely transition with Paul listening to the film book, talking about how spice is essential for space travel. And that segues beautifully into the ship leaving the Highliner as the dialogue overlays that. And then at the very end as well, where it's done. And there's a kind of, you can read that several ways. He's basically signed his own death warrant with that. So there's a lot to interpret in that scene, I think.
Honestly, you guys, I think we could do a whole show just on this scene, because there's so many dynamics politically going on in this scene. You guys have talked about some of the really important ones. The one that had the most emotional impact on me was the Reverend Mother looking at Lady Jessica. You can see there's almost a dialogue with words going on that we don't actually see between that Reverend Mother looking at Jessica and then looking at Paul. And Jessica's realizing that, the Bene Gesserit are like, okay, Jessica, what have you done? Is this the one? Are you loyal to us? I mean, there's just so much going on there. And you see fear, just like in Leto, you see fear in Jessica as well. And so, yeah, there's just, talking about the scale, I love how just visually, what I think Denis has done is he's taken pages of dialogue or words from the book and condensed it into this visual scene where we see the scale. We learn a lot about the Atreides just in a quick second of seeing all their troops, and they chant the name, and it is very militaristic and very loyal, and they have high morals. It establishes a lot about who this house is. But I also love kind of the ominous nature of this Herald of the Change, he's not a bad person, but there's just sort of this ominous feeling of even the distance that the Herald of the Change keeps away from Leto. It's like, why are they standing so far apart? Why are they not talking? Isn't House Atreides doing what they've been asked to do? Aren't they being a good citizen by taking over Arrakis? Well, that's because everybody kind of knows this is a setup. This is a trap. Leto knows it. But yet it's all this formality that, yes, we will take over. There's no call we will not answer. And yet there's a lot of darkness kind of going on underneath this scene. So, but the Bene Gesserit interaction and Jessica's just the way she's communicating so much with her eyes and turning back and forth, looking between Paul and the Reverend Mother. I just loved that, because as a fan of the book, I kind of know the detail of what's going on there. I'm not sure the other audience members that haven't read it caught on to that. Maybe they see, Jessica maybe reacting like, what's going on here? But no, those of us that know, we know what's going on there.
There's a really interesting shot. I was watching it while you were speaking, Garen, and I was looping it. When the Reverend Mother looks at Jessica, it's the total, like, the B word face to her. And Jessica just turns around and looks at Paul, but Paul looks down. I wonder, and maybe this is just stupid Simon headcanon, was Jessica using like hand signals to talk to him, like everything's going to be okay, don't worry?
Would be, who knows? we're waiting for the deleted scene.
I did like how Leto turned around right before he's going to sign, and he looks right at Paul. I actually like that connection. One of you mentioned that earlier, that this is a passing on of the legacy. And so Oscar Isaac, I thought, just did such a great job of being a fatherly leader. Like, I actually felt like he'd be a good dad, and he didn't have a ton of on-screen time. He had a fair amount, but so anyway, wow, there's a lot going on in this scene, a ton.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you can dig into this for a long time. And so going back to the point about technology, because we don't have those computers as I was mentioning earlier, but in this scene you do get to see like the three different types of human evolution. Because as mentioned, you've seen the Bene Gesserit, so they've basically evolved control over their bodies, and they have like almost superhuman abilities. So they're basically like the pinnacle of humanity. And we saw, like how Paul tries to use the voice earlier, but then when one of them tries to use the voice, there's a whole world of difference. Then of course we have the navigators, although that's not explained, but like we're picking up on this. And those are like the ones who control space travel, because they're able to like look into the future and therefore chart like safe paths from one planet to another. And so without them, you wouldn't be able to have this like universe of a million worlds that's or empire of a million worlds that's being held together. And then of course you have Tuver Hawat, and he does the calculation, and you get an idea like, okay, this is a human computer. So like anything that would have been done past with, I guess like for us, our smartphone, that's the job of the Mentats. So yeah, I mean, it's not like, it's not in your face, but like, you basically get to see like all the major factions of that world. And then this was basically where the IMAX preview started, and like we were left hanging for a couple of months, like eager to, like I really want to watch the movie. And then it goes straight into that scene that we saw in the trailer with Duncan Idaho arriving in the hangar, and like the conversation with Paul. So I'll start with you, Mark. I don't think we've talked about that scene specifically. So what was your takeaway from this conversation between the friends?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have talked about this, but yeah, we've seen pretty much all of it in the trailer. And then there was also, I think it was a YouTube advert as well that had almost all of the scene as well. But again, it's a nice little thing where Paul is, the movie breathes, Paul says to Duncan, he's been having, he wants to tell him something. We get Duncan's response that, you can tell him anything. So immediately you get that idea that there's a long friendship between them. And then there's several seconds where Paul is struggling to find how to broach the subject with Duncan. He's going to tell Duncan that he's going to die in his dreams. And, again, in Rise of Skywalker, this would be snap, 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 cut, 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 Marvel movie, colourful explosions. But here it's Paul, and you can see he's looking down, he's trying to find the words. And then when he does tell Duncan that he's going to die, Duncan tries to change the mood immediately, makes it into a joke. Dreams make good stories. It's a wonderful scene, and it strengthens that relationship between Paul and Duncan. Something in the Lynch movie, we basically get, may the hand of God be with you, and that's pretty much the interaction between Paul and Duncan. So yeah, it's great scene, lovely effects.
Yeah, and I was going to note that there was one important piece of information in that scene, which is we know that Duncan is leaving to Arrakis 2 weeks in advance of the others. So that's like one of the few instances we get about how much time is passing in the beginning of the movie, because it does, even though we have some of these more intimate scenes, like it does go by quite quickly. So we get the idea that there's still 2 weeks here before the main Atreides family joins Duncan on Arrakis.
What I was going to say, now that we've seen the scene officially, there was the advert, there was also, the part of it in the trailer. There's no mention of Chani whatsoever. In the trailer, we're believed to talk that he's talking to Duncan about, Chani. It's all about Duncan's faith. What will happen to Duncan. And I love the quietness. I had a dream. Pause. This is what happened. And Duncan plays it off kind of cool, like, cool. So I met up with the Fremen. I guess that worked out, huh? Awesome. Oh yeah, you're going to die. And then you can see Jason Momoa take a little breather and be like, what did you say? Like, in the back of his head, okay, Paul, take back. But it's also very interesting because we do have a cameo by a little bug that's been all around the internet recently. And we'll talk more about that eventually. But yeah, beautiful scene. And I know, Garen, this makes you think of like an X-Wing hangar. And in the background, if you look, there's a ship that's kind of shaped like maybe an X-Wing prototype. When Duncan first lands, and that was one of my first things, I was like, it's like a mixture of an X-Wing and a Naboo fighter.
I really liked the pacing of this scene. I also loved the composition, the setup, where we get to see Duncan's reaction as he's kind of underneath his ship, kind of fixing something, and so we get to see his reaction when Paul finally gets around to voicing, and I see you lying dead, and then you see, because Duncan is, imagine, we really, this is like an uncle nephew kind of a relationship, as it were. Paul's a young teenager, Duncan's an adult, right? Duncan's had a lot of life experience. He doesn't want to just react to freak Paul out. He's going to respond, to kind of put him at ease. But you saw the look in his eyes as as he was pointed toward us, the camera, that he was like, oh my gosh, what if Paul's right? You could see that response. But I love how this scene, you keep saying it, Simon, it's like it allows it to breathe. And so it feels real. Sometimes in some science fiction, in some movies of any type, it's like they're just robotically kind of going through their lines. And with this, it feels like the relationship really is close, bonded friends. And one of them is young and learning. And I love how Paul wanted to go because he's like, I want to go with you. Well, that would be natural for a teenager to say, because he looks up to Duncan, but he wants to be there to save Duncan because he cares about him, And I just thought the play out of this in such a short period of time was masterfully done. And yes, I did totally dig the hangar. I was looking all around and how many people are in the background. And, I do. I really love that stuff. But even more, I love that I'm caring about these characters and the relationships are bonded. I love it.
This scene makes me think not as dark, and I hate using the word emo. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mr. Robot with Robbie Malek. It felt like a Mr. Robot scene, and not because they're robotic. That's not what the show is about at all, but very well acted. It takes time. It's slow, but yet it's a short scene. It's maybe one of the top 5 scenes in the movie for me. And in the book, we know Paul doesn't have any friends of his age. And we know that Gurney and Duncan are his friends, his mentors. And you're right, it's that total uncle, hey, Duncan's the cool older brother / uncle. I know when my brother came to town when I was little, and he's like, this is when I would live in LA, and he's like, well, I'm going to go to Guitar Center. I can't play an instrument to save my life. But I was like, okay, can I tag along? can I go to Guitar Center with you? Like, so I feel like that's Paul right there. Like, hey, can I hang out? Also, you're gonna die, so I kind of want to save your life. But is it cool? Can I go with you? And the 2 weeks part is very interesting because I talked to Marcus about something that we'll get to timeline wise.
Yeah, and then we go straight into the next scene again with Paul, and he's walking on the seaside cliffs of Caladan, and the location that they chose for this is just stunning because you have like the ocean in the background. It really showcases what sort of planet they're living on. Like, I mean, of course, you had those the storms, but you also have all that beauty at the same time. And yeah, there are a lot of things that I love about the scene, but this was also one of the scenes where I did have a few nitpicks into like how they handled the conversation between Paul and Duke Leto.
This was one of the scenes where people were nitpicking the fact that Paul calls Leto dad. Not father or anything but dad. But as you were saying, it's very natural, it's very teenager, it's not formal, and it just shows the loving relationship between Paul and Leto. It's a bit of a strange scene, I guess, because Leto is trying to prepare Paul. Leto knows that they're walking into a trap, and he wants Paul to be ready for what's to come. He doesn't want him to go off. He says, you can't go off and play with your mate Duncan on Arrakis. You need to come with us. You need to be prepared. The Fremen could potentially be their allies. I think he talks about desert power in this scene. But it is a Paul and Leto scene, and one of the few we get in the movie. So it's an important scene in that point.
It's a very gothic looking scene, not just because of the cemetery, but if you look at the lighting, the costume, it's very memento mori. Like, Leto knows that he's going to die. Memento mori means eventually, like, everyone dies. That's like the Cliff Note version of it. But it's very much, I'm doing this for you again, Paul. And he tells him, like, you're going to have to lead. I didn't want to lead. I wanted to be a pilot. And in my head, I'm like, well, Oscar Isaac, in another universe, you are the best pilot ever. Sorry, Han Solo. But just a beautiful scene. And it's also them not being in front. You can see, like, security. Obviously, they're not going to let Leto just walk around the cemetery by himself. But it's father and son. So he calls him dad. It's not the end of the world. He doesn't call him, well, my child, he calls him my son. And it's a beautiful moment between two family members. And it's pretty much, once again, the whole, I don't know how much time I'm going to have left with you. So I'm telling you this, and once again, we get more about the bull. Like, grandfather, fought bulls. That got a chuckle out of me. I don't know if anyone else laughed about that.
Yep. Yeah, look where that got him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And how the scene ends also is very much, they look at the graves and they're like, you have to do this for them. And what I'm thinking is, those are past Atreides, it's the grandfather, the great-grandfather, the great-grandmother, it's I guess it would be the Atreides cemetery. Like, we don't know about this. This isn't in the book, but it's a beautiful scene. And also, if you ever want to know what the Pacific Northwest looks like, that's pretty much it. That's what Washington looks like. Cloudy and beautiful scenery.
I really liked the way this scene could have been all about, Leto did kind of talk about it. He kind of, at the very beginning, as they start walking, Leto's kind of making the argument for, why this could make sense. Why going to Arrakis could actually turn in our favor if we harness the power of the natives, the Fremen. But what I like about it is it didn't just continue with that sort of logical approach to why this is happening, but instead it transformed more into the relationship definition of father and son, where I actually really like how, you see Paul doubt himself. Like, I don't know if I'm up to this. Like, what if I'm not what you expect me to be? What what son doesn't think that as a teenager? We all go through that, right? But to have Leto's response be so healthy. I'm a psychology major in college, and that was a really healthy response by a dad to not just say, oh no, son, you'll do fine, don't worry about it. But instead he's like, even if you weren't, you are still everything I ever wanted you to be. Like, that's just really good writing. That's really good character development right there. But yeah, it is kind of it's not a dark scene. They're out in the sunlight, but it has kind of a dark, kind of ominous feel to it. But I like how we're getting these characters more defined.
And what you're just talking about, Garen, I think that's the part that I absolutely love about the scene, because it perfectly establishes that relationship between father and son, and you get that dynamic. I guess what I would nitpick, or like what I'm more critical about this scene, is how they handled the exposition. For me, it was a bit hard to believe that, like, 2 weeks before they're leaving to Arrakis, like, this is the first time he's talking to Paul about, our position in the lance rod, and how the emperor is threatened by us. Like, I feel that this would be something that they had talked about, already in the past. So it felt sort of like that sort of, almost like a soap opera moment where you're like, where they're sort of like, in more like obviously like talking about, oh yeah, this is the situation. Your uncle sitting over there, like, he does, this for a living, and like, I mean, it works, but I felt that this was one of the points where I felt that the exposition overall was the weakest, which I think in other parts of the movie that it really did hit well. So that was my only criticism with this particular scene.
Marcus, I think that's fair. But again, you only have so much time to work with when you're creating a film and you're writing these scenes. So you're right. I do see the weakness of the dialogue here. You're kind of throwing a lot of stuff in that they would have definitely had these kinds of conversations prior to now, right? But again, you've got this moment. You've got to establish this scene and understand these characters' connection. So, films, writing a book, you just have sort of this unlimited ability to, like, create this world and the dynamics of the characters. In a film, it's really a creative limitation exercise,
I was just going to say that there is a scene a bit later on where Leto says, Paul needs to sit in on the staff meetings. So it is almost as if Paul is coming of age. He's been involved in the politics of the house a bit more at this point. So yeah, it's a little bit exposition-y for the sake of exposition, but I think it does sort of fit into the arc of Paul's journey. Leto might have left it a bit late to brief Paul on all these bits, but he's training up to become the Duke.
But I feel like maybe he's a teenager, and you got to tell him a couple times, like, I know I heard my mom tell me a million times, hey, you should clean your room. Don't forget that you have hockey practice this weekend, back and forth. So maybe it was like, okay, I'm going to tell him one more time that this is very important, desert power. All the way through this movie in my head, I was like, hashtag desert power.
Yeah, again, I think the locations that they chose for this are just stunning. One thing that I had mentioned earlier, like, you don't get a sense that there is like a town or a city nearby, because this is basically a capital, right? Like, here you're only seeing the castle, so maybe like the city is just like a bit on a distance. They would have loved to see more about like even if it was just like a couple of seconds of getting an idea of like how the city life is. But yeah, stunning scenery, and then you go straight into the scene where Paul and Gurney have their fight in the training room, and it was described as by the fight coordinator Roger Ruan as one of the most intense sequences in terms of the fight scenes. So Garen, what are your thoughts about this whole interaction between Paul and one of his other friends, although this is, I guess, more of a stern presence in his life?
Yeah. So here's where I had kind of a different mental image of Gurney. He's obviously stern. He's he's kind of the right-hand man to Leto, and obviously is a very commanding personality. I thought Josh Brolin made it even more intense. Like, I thought he added even more sort of rigidity to this character. But having watched it the second time, I actually really liked how it's because he cares about Paul. He really cares about this sort of, son-like figure in his life. He really wants him to survive. He wants him to be ready. And so he's not giving him any leniency, and I thought this scene also established the importance of the shields and the importance of, this is not Star Wars with laser blasters everywhere. This is more of almost a medieval, we're fighting with swords now, kind of a world. And I don't think people think that when they go in to see a science fiction film. They don't think of a lot of swords. I mean, lightsabers, yes, but not actual swords and blades and things like that. So I think a lot happens in this. But you also, like, I think one of you mentioned this coming of age. You're like, wow, this kid can fight. Like, this kid, even though he doesn't win the sparring with Gurney, because Gurney, has a blade to his belly. But I think it really does show you this kid has some potential.
One very important part of this dialogue, and early on in this scene, he's like, so now that Duncan's off-world, you're the sword master. So it kind of already shows where Gurney's status is in House Atreides. I would have loved, when he calls him old man, to hear Gurney call him a young pup. I would have loved that. But it's a great scene. And it does show that Paul is already a great fighter. And this scene will help in the long run with one of the final last scenes of this film, and also if they do it right, and I believe they will in the second part, where a character that was portrayed by Sting in the 80s, this scene will also bookend. So it's you get the 3 sword fights in Dune. It's a great scene. It's also, the design of it makes me think of a very Frank Lloyd Wright type of house design. It's a beautiful, minimalist set. There's not too much stuff, and a lot of other movies you would have had a million stuff in the background. Going back to the Star Wars sequels, even the prequels, you would have had droids. Granted, there's no droids in Dune, but you would have had something in the background. You would have had a bunch of stuff. It's just filmmaking 101, for set designs. I feel like this movie will be looked at for many reasons, and the set designs are a big part of it.
Yeah, the set design and the lighting coming in through the window, silhouetting them, great stuff. One line I did like, because it comes back a bit later, is Paul recognizes his footsteps, and we get that line later on in the spice harvesting scene.
Yeah, and then immediately after this scene, we actually jump to a completely different planet, and you see the stark contrast. So it goes to Gedi Prime, and that's the homeworld of House Harkonnen. So here we get to see the brutal animals that Gurney was talking about just a moment ago. So I just love that transition here. And of course you have Raban, and he's furious, and this is one of the scenes that I think David S. Malkin had referred to when he was talking about Dave Bautista giving a standout performance, about how much emotion and how furious he was in that scene. Simon, what was your first impression of Gedi Prime?
I loved it. It made me think of, I don't know if you guys ever watched the documentary about the Jovanovski film that was supposed to be made, and he wanted Giger, depends how you say it, to design, who did the designs of the xenomorphs for Alien, to do Gedi Prime. And it felt very industrial, and that's what I imagined. It felt very Giger-ish. It felt dark. It felt really industrial metal. Maybe it's my love of music that I can see Nine Inch Nails being in the background a lot in this scene, but it's just the total opposite. They don't have natural water. They have steam coming out. there is no greenery whatsoever. It's just darkness, And also that shot of the Baron the first time we see him nude in his steam bath is very awkward, but you also see the size right away. You can see this is a big man, big man personality and physically, which is crucial to the story. And I love everything with Piter again. And I love that he's calculating. We see his eyes very much, doing what a Mentat does. Bautista nailed it perfectly in that scene. Like, you see the range. And I didn't know Dave Bautista could have that range. Because every time I think of him, I still think of him as Drax. But it was great. And the line that I love that the Baron says, and I'm probably misquoting it, one is a gift, not a gift. Very much like what Leto's doing for Paul. Hey, I'm setting this for you, Rabon. Like, there's a reason why you're going to come back. You're just going on like a little sabbatical, little vacation, but you're going to come back after this is all done.
Comparing again to Lynch, I really like what Denis doing here with the Baron, because, and what Lynch did is create almost this out of control, just raging man, which does create fear and does establish him as a bad guy, as the bad guy. But I actually really love how Stellan Skarsgård is just this quiet, almost just understated evil. And I think that's brilliant, because you've got Raban, who's just out of control, screaming his guts out, because he's so angry and furious that this is going to get handed over. So I just think it's really brilliant character design to create this feeling of, gosh, what is this Baron capable of? Because I don't understand him. Like, what is he about? Like, what? And of course, we'll learn that as part two and comes along. But I just like how it's understated. And I think that really creates a fearful character. I love it.
Yeah. Stellan Skarsgård said that he hated the Baron armor costume that we see in the toys, because he felt that was too Marvelish. He doesn't need that armor. So and we only see that armor in like one or two brief shots. So he liked the 90s. He doesn't need that armor. He's a imposing man. He's a dangerous man in and of himself. He doesn't need a costume, an Iron Man costume or anything like that to be dangerous.
Yeah, and what you're saying, Garen, like this is like you immediately feel the evil, right? And this is someone you take seriously, whereas like in some of the earlier adaptations, you may not have taken him as seriously. Like, it was more as Denis Villeneuve said, he didn't want like the Baron to be a caricature as he maybe was in some of the previous adaptations. He wanted this to be like, the frightening presence, like someone who has like extreme intelligence. And you see, like, even though the Harkonnens they're known for being brutal, but you see that the Baron, he's very calculating. He knows exactly what's going on. And then again, like here, like as going back to Piter, like we saw a bit of Tuver Hawat for House Atreides during the ceremony, and then here we see Piter, and these are basically like the two weapons in a way, like these human computers that are sort of planning the strategy in the background of these two houses. We don't see a lot of it in the movie, but we return to Caladan, and then we see again the Highliner, and we see the Bene Gesserit's ship, which has a very unique design as well. So it's I just love how all the factions, they have like very distinctive, like whether it's the settings of their world, their ship design, the outfits, like you really see the characterization of these different settings. So they're arriving in Caladan. And one thing that really stands out to me, and like we actually didn't see much of this at all in trailers or promo materials, is like the stormy nights on Caladan. So like that really adds so much ambience to the environment, where it's just pouring, and like Lady Jessica is waiting outside for the Reverend Mother to arrive. I feel it's just like adds so much atmosphere and to this. I guess it's a really heavy scene that's coming up. So before there's actually the Gom Jabbar scene. We have the introduction to Dr. Yui.
I like Paul's first line. He's friends with Duncan and Gurney, and he's like, "What's Yui's doing here?" Almost dismissive, but yeah, he's not expecting anything that happens to him that night. And Dr. Yui, we get some Chinese dialogue. I believe that's authentic Chinese that Dr. Yui and Paul are speaking to each other. I've seen people complaining that that's pandering to the Chinese audience. But, you know, I think if they're going to be speaking English in the future, they can be speaking Chinese as well. I've not got a problem with that. And I did like the way that they've adapted it slightly. So Dr. Yui is almost psychic. He lays hands on Paul to sense how he's doing. He hasn't got a tricorder or anything like that to do those readings. So a nice scene to show the relationship between Paul and Yui. Yui confides in Paul to be wary of the Bene Gesserit.
Yeah. So when I first read the book way back in 83, 84, I actually envisioned Yui as Asian. So when that was when he was cast, and sorry, I don't know the actor's name, but I thought that was brilliant because the name sounds very Asian. And I actually agree with Mark. I don't think speaking a Chinese dialect is pandering. I think it's natural because this is an extension. This is 20,000 years from now, from our human race, right? So why wouldn't, someone of Asian descent also be speaking in a language related to their ethnic background? That just seems natural and correct to me. But we don't see a lot of Yui. We see just kind of these few interactions. But I thought it was played very well because I trusted him. I mean, of course, I knew what was going to happen, but to the audience, he's very trustworthy. He's very kind. He's very loving. He cares about what's going on. He even communicates things to Paul to prepare him for what's coming. So I actually really like the Yui character.
Interesting that you say that when you first read it, you pictured him of Asian descent. Every time I heard the name Yui, I always thought of him being Russian or Ukrainian. That scene is so crucial once again because it sets up who the Bene Gesserits are even more, just between that little dialogue. And if you put the subtitles on HBO Max, it does say speaking in Mandarin. I'm perfectly fine with it. This is humanity's future in the long run. And in the later books, they even mention major characters in human history. So, and once again, we get the bull. We get another shot of the bull right before Paul enters the room. So it's a great shot. When they do arrive, it makes me think of a movie that terrified me as a kid. And you guys might laugh, but I don't care. It's still one of the most scariest movies ever to me, is E.T. It felt very E.T.-like when they landed. And I'm not bashing the movie whatsoever, but E.T. used to scare the living crap out of me. But that shot as they're landing with, the trees and all that made me go, oh, this is creepy. So this is hitting some creepy Simon vibes where Denis knows I'm afraid of E.T. Because the Bene Gesserits are supposed to be scary. They're not, they're not the Girl Scouts. They're not going to come and give you cookies. They're not the Red Cross. Definitely not. They have, once again, that gothic element to them of they're powerful. And in one of the upcoming scenes, Paul knows that they're powerful. And once again, you could have done it really slow, but the dialogue, and we'll get to that scene, where it shows, hey, these are why these ladies are so powerful early on, and not make it slow for, the audience.
Yeah, I think you'd hate that deleted scene when the Reverend Mother tells Paul to phone home then. If
the hand in the box, the phone home, all creepy.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on the part about the bull because this is the moment I was thinking about because we already saw it in the breakfast scene. We saw the painting of House Atreides. We saw the bull. It's already been established that this is part of the Atreides culture, which was, by the way, influenced by ancient Greece. You can see that from the names, and the significance of that bull head is that's actually the bull that killed Paul's grandfather in a bullfight. So Paul Atreides, he was a popular duke, but he met an untimely end in one of these fights, and that's covered in the expanded Dune books how that happened. But basically, this is significant because Duke Leto keeps this bull's head as a reminder there. So it's important, and this comes up multiple times in the movie, like also in the grave scene as we were talking about. So I know that question has come up a couple of times. So there is a special significance to that. Yeah. So just talking about this beginning part of Caladan, and the movie really does take its time to explore like the homeworld of House Atreides. There's so much in here. So we're gonna finish our first in-depth breakdown here. And then the next episode, we're going to be looking at departure from Caladan and arrival from Arrakis. So let's sign off. So Mark, thanks again for joining us for this special episode. Where can people find you online?
Thanks so much for inviting me back. People can find me at DuneInfo on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and all the socials.
And Garen at Dune Companion on Twitter. And I love doing this. This is just so much fun to be with people who appreciate it like I do, and we can just dig deep. It's fun.
You can find me at sdowdy on the socials. Also, thank you. I didn't mention it last time I was on, but thank you again to everyone that watches, listens. We have a nice little community, and this is one of the highlights of my week, boys. I love nerding out about Dune and talking about it and going deep. And we're only 20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody who's engaging and supporting us. So this is Marcus Gabriel. You can find me on DuneNewsNet.com and Dune Newsnet on Twitter and Instagram. And look forward to talking to you for our next special episode.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.